Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a slightly different type of video. Today it's story time, as I want to document for the entire internet the story of my good friend Richard's Hyundai and its misfortune. So Richard has a grey 2017 Hyundai i40, and the Hyundai i40 is a nice car in my opinion. I actually really like these cars. I don't like the brand name though, it's too hard to say, but I don't know what to do about that. Anyway, the point is, they are nice cars brunt. Richard's Hyundai usually spent its days parked in the parking lot by his apartment complex in rural Hungary, where it would bask in the sunlight, enjoying peaceful days, not having much to do. As Richard don't really use it too much, he mostly has the things he needs very close by. He mostly uses it to go to drive-thrus and sometimes for trips to Budapest. Even though the Hyundai was parked outside and subject to the elements and the shit of birds, it was in really nice condition. But back in 2021, Richard was renovating parts of his apartment, and so the Hyundai saw regular use. You know, for picking up larger things that Richard couldn't or didn't want to carry. As the apartment was renovated, Richard used multiple workers to do things for him, things he didn't know how to do himself, or things he was just too lazy to do. And this paragraph makes Richard seem like a useless lazy person, which I guess he kinda is, but for whatever reason, we still love him anyway. And one of these workers is about to take center stage of our story. He was a painter, and we shall not mention his name, because I don't know it. But Richard needed painting done in his apartment very quickly, as it needed to be done before his kitchen was put in. The painter gave a price which Richard found acceptable, as it was less than the other painters he had talked to, so this guy was hired. But the painter was slow, messy, and the quality of work was not satisfactory to say the least, and Richard may as well gotten his friends or family to do it, and it wouldn't have looked any worse. What's even worse is that there had been a huge misunderstanding when it came to the total price of the job. What Richard thought would cost him 60 to 80,000 Hungarian monopoly money was in actual 10 times more. A significant difference to say the least, and a lot more than the other painters he had offers from. There are of course a lot of details I could go into, but it's not all that relevant or interesting. The main point is that the painter in Richard's eyes didn't do a very good job, and certainly not good enough to expect that kind of payout. There was no written contract for the work, which was a mistake from both parties obviously, but Richard thought fine, he'd grind out the money and pay them, but as they finished up their work looked terrible, and he pointed out the not so good looking work to the painter, which seemingly wasn't too bothered about it. But later Richard's mom came for a visit, and he told her about the situation, and she looked at the work the painter had done. Furiously, she demanded that Richard gave her the painter's phone number, which he did, probably out of fear of his mother. It's okay, Richard, my mom can be scary too. What happened next was that Richard's mom proceeded to call the painter, told him off for his terrible work, and that she wouldn't pay for it, which they probably assumed was Richard's word. They were supposed to come fix some of their bad work, but only came to pick up their ladder and bucket. And that is when we get back to our friend, the lovely Hyundai, standing peacefully in the parking lot, as it always did when not in use. As Richard came out of his building, he could see the car looked dirty and not in the condition he last saw it in, but he just thought a massive bird has taken a shit on it or something. But it was not a bird that had taken a massive shit on it. It was the painter, allegedly. Well, he didn't actually shit on it, but he had fucked it up good. The poor Hyundai, an innocent bystander, had 3 of its tires punctured with a knife, brand new Michelin tires gone, the exhaust was filled with expanding foam, and some kind of chemical was thrown on the car to ruin its paint. A truly horrible thing to do to an innocent, pretty little car. The Hyundai was obviously in no shape to drive, punctured tires, no flow for exhaust, so Richard started by lifting the car up with the help of a friend, changing the tires, taking apart the exhaust system, which included cutting it up, burning out the foam and welding it back together after. And then, at least the car worked. But no car deserves this kind of paint job, and Richard was determined to get it fixed, but it wasn't easy to find someone who could and would fix it, as most told him it was a total waste of time and money. And so while Richard spent his days trying to find someone, the state of the Hyundai's paint would slowly get worse. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The day after Richard had worked to get the Hyundai drivable again, he reported the incident to the police, and you may be shocked to learn they actually investigated it. Yeah, as a Norwegian, this may be the biggest plot twist in the entire story. The police talked to the residents of the apartment complex, who are usually very nosy and knows about everything that happens both inside the complex as well as outside of it. While of course they didn't see or hear anything about what happened around the time our dear Hyundai was violated. And now time passed quickly, as the Hyundai still stood in the parking lot with a paint job that looked like Satan himself had ridden it through hell and back, and over time it corroded and got in even worse shape. But after quite some time had passed, Richard found a guy who would fix the paint job. They settled for a price and a time range, which was supposed to be in 2 weeks, and Richard was very much looking forward to having his Hyundai back in tip-top shape. But time passed and nothing happened. For over 5 months, the dear Hyundai stood parked in an unknown lot, awaiting its treatment. Meanwhile, Richard had to rent cars to get around, which almost felt like cheating. Once the Hyundai was actually finished, Richard once again had made a fatal mistake. There was once again no written agreement on price, so the guy fixing the paint of the car wanted more than they had initially agreed on. But this time Richard discussed the price and they came to an agreement. It was more money, but it was worth it to get his hands back on his lovely Hyundai, that now had spent almost half a year away from its home in the parking lot outside his apartment complex. And now the Hyundai is back, spending its days in the sunlight, being driven regularly by its owner, and Richard has decked it out even more with a new entertainment system and a chip tuning set to make it even better than it was before. A truly happy ending to the story. But many hours of work and waiting, and a lot of money had to be spent to get this car back in proper order. So I guess the moral of the story is, whenever you have people working for you, always have a written contract or agreement on at least the price, because it's impossible to know who is capable of doing batshit crazy stuff. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this story about Richard's Hyundai i40. I certainly enjoyed working on it, though it was pretty terrible to hear about it when it was ongoing. I'd really like to make more stories like this about cars me and my friends have owned through the years, but I don't think any of those will have the craziness that this story does, but let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.